Good afternoon, Niner faithful, and happy new year. Welcome to 2022. It is going to be a good one. I'm pumped up about it. Very excited for today's show because of the special guest that I have here beside me. Many of you will recognize immediately Eric Crocker. Croc, welcome to the program. Very excited to have you here today. Happy 2022, man.
Oh man, of course, thanks for having me on. Happy New Year. And in the new year, man, I got to get whatever camera you have. I got to get that camera.
Well, I'll be happy to provide you. I went crazy with my little studio setup here, and so I've got a whole list of it. I'm happy to share what my equipment setup is. Yeah, I like to keep the crisp camera and make it a little bit more pleasant for the viewers, right? To give them the good viewing experience.
My homeboy got on me, man. He was like, "Are you a professional or not? Invest in your the visual." So I got to go buy a camera, man. My homie done punked me, and whatever camera it is that you have, that's what I need. It looks good. It looks good.
I did a fair amount of research before going into it. I will pass that along to you. No question about that at all. So you and I share a little bit of commonality here, right? I mean, it is probably limited, but I spent some time in Stockton, California, and I hear you referencing back to growing up in Stockton. I was out there, man, between going back and forth between University of the Pacific and Delta Community College. I wasn't your standard 4-year college grad, but I was there from like 1996 through the early 2000s and spent some quality time in Stockton, that's for sure.
Yeah, I was there too, man. I'm, born and raised Stockton, California, North Side, Valverde Park. So, I'm all familiar with UOP, Delta. I went to Delta shoots. I mean, 49ers, and you're around during that time. Training camp used to be at UOP. So I was really young. I don't know what my mom was thinking. Let me hop on the city bus, but I used to hop on the city bus and head over there to watch the 49ers practice. Jerry Rice, Steve Young, JJ Stokes, Terrell Owens. All those guys, yeah.
Man, those are good times. I wonder if we were in close proximity to one another, because I was definitely at a ton of those practices during those years as well. That was right in between when I was there. Yeah, proud Delta Community College grad myself. So that was some fun years in Stockton. Now, something we don't have in common that I wish maybe I did is your background in the NFL. For those that don't follow Croc on his own channel, you should. The information is down below. You can follow him on Twitter. Fantastic follow on Twitter. Subscribe to his YouTube page is also down there. Also, the co-host of Locked On 49ers, rocking regular content with that pod. All of those links are down below. But Croc, your background sets you up perfectly to speak about this because of that experience within the NFL. I was hoping you might share a little bit of that background for any viewers that aren't familiar of what that experience was like in the league.
Yeah, man. I mean, for me, kind of crazy just how everything came together. Growing up in Stockton, really didn't have a whole lot of, guidance, I guess you could say. So my path to even having the opportunity to play in the NFL is definitely unique. I told you I went to Delta College. I flunked out of Delta College at the age of 18 or whatever. I ended up having a kid at a young age. So for a few years, I just worked random jobs, did all kind of stuff I probably shouldn't have been doing. Me and my best friend, he went to jail for a couple years. I went back to junior college, to Modesto Junior College at the age of 21. And
Nice.
From there, I was able to earn a scholarship. And one thing led to another. Played in the Arena League as a rookie. Arena League got me to the NFL. Signed with the Jets. So that's kind of the sped up version of it. But that's kind of how that whole thing, how I got to be signed with the Jets.
What do you think that experience and the way in which it unfolded for you? By the way, it sounds like we had more in common as troubled youths. I also managed to leave Delta College in not so pleasant circumstances and then come back at a later time and fight through, what I probably shouldn't have been doing at that age. What do you think that experience versus people who just went, straight, got recruited into colleges, had those scholarships coming in? How did that different path for you shape what the overall experience was once you made it to the league? Having to go through the arena football route, did you appreciate it more because of that path?
Yeah, the funny thing is because of my whole path and all that, I had some teammates and I remember having conversations with some of those guys. And I had all these various jobs that I worked and different things I went through. And a lot of these guys, you get to the NFL and they had never had a job before outside of playing in the NFL. So I think just even having those kind of conversations with people, that was very unique and it's really a different perspective. I think for me, I never, I was never like the superstar Pop Warner player or the superstar high school guy. I struggled a lot academically. Wasn't the superstar collegiate player. So when I got there, I think I just had a different appreciation for what the NFL was and kind of what it offered to me.
And when you left it, I mean, for those of us that have never and will never have the experience of being near an NFL locker room, I mean, my dream would be to get in, interview a player, but that may never come back to members of the media. But being there in the locker room as a part of an NFL team, what were some of your high level impressions that you were struck with playing in the NFL? Was it more of a business? Was it a brotherhood of men? How would you describe it?
Yeah, 100% of business. And that's what you see right away. I remember from the time I showed up, just with the workouts, I had a few workouts, private workouts before I actually signed with the Jets. But signing with the Jets, that whole thing and the situation and how that played out. But going into the locker room and, the first day I'm in the locker room, I see my name tag right next to like Darrell Revis and Quentin Coples and Muhammad Wilkerson. Those were the guys right
Man.
next to me in my locker. So now all of a sudden it's like, dang, I'm here. These are guys I've been watching on TV. These are high profile athletes. Tim Tebow's walking in, and I'm like, wow, that's Tim Tebow. So just that whole thing of kind of, I don't want to say being starstruck, but just guys that you kind of watched a lot of. And then you realize the business aspect of it, just seeing guys get cut left and right. And I know, we report on a lot of these things. We talk about it. Oh, this guy was let go and this guy was brought in. But the human element of it, like it sucks. And it's scary when you are a guy at the bottom of the roster because you see how often there's turnover. And when you are a guy at the bottom, you never know when it's going to be you next. So, I remember even when I had got let go the first time, it was you had Joe McKnight, RIP Joe McKnight, he had a concussion. Chris Ivory had an ankle sprain, and Brian Winters had something going on with his ankle. So they're like, oh, okay, well, we got to go with guys in the next game. We'll just cut Crocker, and it's like, it's just a business. It's just a business aspect of it. So you understand it when you see it. And I think being there kind of makes you numb to it a little bit.
Yeah,
But
right.
yeah, it was a unique, experience just kind of seeing how that whole thing played out.
Because the average viewer doesn't think about that. They don't understand that those people toward the end of the roster that may be on and off of a roster, that there are entire lives being impacted in that, right? I mean, you're talking about having already had a child at that point, and so there are people that are counting on you at that point, and being on and off the roster is the difference between where you're living, like what city you need to reside in. That's pretty crazy to think about someone like a Dante Johnson who has been on and off of the 49ers roster and gone through that turmoil and the personal toll that must take. Because, I mean, anybody knows that when you don't have that job security, it's an unnerving feeling.
Yeah, 100%. So that's why when I see guys like that, and then here's another perspective too. When you're actually on the roster, like the first thing, because I grew up a fan of football. Like I've always been a fan. Like when I was a kid, I it wasn't even so much like, oh, I want to be an NFL player. I wanted to be Stuart Scott. Now early on I realized I might not have the voice for it. You know what I'm saying? I got this like raspy voice, and it's kind of an acquired taste, kind of like beer. Like some people like it, some people don't. But that was kind of what I wanted to be like that. It wasn't even so much make it to the NFL. So I had just this love and passion for football to where I knew who everyone was and all that type of things. And then you get there and the business element of it, it kind of, it's hard to explain. It changes that perspective a little bit, but it has helped me a lot because now I get to see both ends of it. Obviously like the super 49er fan, even when I was with the Jets. And then, whether it's being released, whatever the case is, I just get to see like just a pure behind the scenes aspect of how that whole thing works out.
Very nice. Very nice.
Oh, but I know what I'm going to say. But guys like Dante Johnson, right? And
Yeah.
understanding when I got there, I grew up idolizing the football players. And you think guys are a certain way, like, oh, you get to the NFL and everybody's just so good, right? Like that's what we think, right? Oh, their NFL players are so good. And when I got there, I realized right away, oh man, these dudes are just like me. Like they're good, but I'm good too. And then you see that there are a few freaks. So like right away, I realized like when Sheldon Richardson showed up, I was like, okay, Sheldon Richardson, like he's different. Muhammad Wilkerson, it was clear he was different. Antonio Cromartie, he was different. Like you could tell, like, I mean, he's like 6'3, 6'4, 220 pounds. Everybody could, he could outrun everybody. Like you
Step
could see there were
above
some guys that
everybody
were
else.
just different, but everybody else is pretty regular. You know what I'm saying? Like when I say regular, it's just they're just good guys. So when I look at like Dante Johnson, I know that the league is really made up of guys more so like Dante Johnson.
Right.
I know that's infuriating to fans, but there are very few like elite players. Like there's like Nick Bosa, and then most other guys are like Arden Key.
Right. That there's a big difference in between those two calibers. It's fascinating to look at it from an inside perspective. And now that you have that, how does that shape your ability to speak about the game now? How did playing in the league shape how you talk about it now when you're on Locked On 49ers?
It helps a lot because I understand both sides of it, but it's also frustrating because it's hard to explain that to like a fan that these guys aren't as bad as you think they are and not as easily replaceable. Well, they are replaceable, but it's still hard to replace them with someone that's just so much more talented.
Right.
So trying to get like fans to understand that when you see guys like Josh Norman or Ambry Thomas or Diamador Lenore or whatever, yeah, you can replace them with anybody, but more times than not, the results are going to be somewhat similar. I don't think you're going to get as drastic of a difference in play as you think. So that's the tough part when you know how guys kind of are. It's hard to explain that to fans that think that everybody's supposed to be like a Nick Bosa, or not even like a Nick Bosa. Let's say they think everybody's supposed to be like even Emmanuel Mosley, who I think is a step above, some of those other guys, but he's one of the better corners in all of the NFL.
Right. And so tell me if you think this is right, because this is a theory that I've had that I don't think most fans appreciate, that the talent within the NFL, the reason that the parity is so great is that from team to team, to your point of the vast majority of the team being made up of guys of relative talent, that the difference between the most talented team in the league and the least talented team in the league is not as big of a difference as it would appear, right? That if you added a couple of players and the right coach to put those players in the right position, you could get that worst to first change that you see in the NFL almost every year.
I think a lot of it is based on, kind of who's leading the team. And, that starts at the top, right? With the head coach. And then do you have a good quarterback? That helps a lot, even with the 49ers, for all the, frustrations with Jimmy Garoppolo, he's still a good starting NFL quarterback that can help you win games. And I think fans think that there are just a lot of guys out there like that, and there's not. Even if you feel like he's not the best, he's able to execute at a high enough level to win you games. So head coach, how can he instill, like this sense of confidence in the players and get the most out of them? However he does that, that'll help result in wins. That's worth some wins. And then also the quarterback position. Outside of that, teams, look at 2010, right? 49ers were fairly average. And then you get a new head coach in there and maybe, a year more of kind of development and getting some other guys in there, and boom, you are the best team in the NFL. And, a couple plays away from being in the Super Bowl. So, yeah, there's not as much of a drastic difference. I think as far as being consistent with it, it starts at the quarterback position for the most part. Head coach, quarterback, you get those right, you'll be good for a long
Yeah,
time.
right. That is what's needed for that minimum of quality football. And I think you're spot on. To me, you're talking about somewhere in the 15th to 20th best quarterback in the league when you're talking about Jimmy Garoppolo. You could debate where he ends up on that spectrum, but let's say he's 20th. That still means that he is one of the 20th best athletes at that position in the entire world. And there aren't 32 of them. So when people say he doesn't have any trade value or that he's trash, it's just sort of absurd, and that's taking it to an extreme. Let me ask you this. You mentioned head coach. Just as a personal preference, would you have enjoyed playing under Kyle Shanahan from what you know of him?
He's a little different, and I'll say this, though. The great ones are different.
Yes.
I've heard a lot of stories from some of my homies that played for the 49ers when Jim Harbaugh was there, and, he was different. Jim
Yeah.
Harbaugh was a different kind of coach. Rex Ryan, I was with Rex Ryan. Rex Ryan, super different. Like, he's different, but he instilled this level of confidence in you that you felt like you can go take on anything, anybody. Like, I can literally run through this brick wall because Coach Rex told me I can. So coaches go about doing it a different way. Kyle Shanahan, from what I see, he's very no nonsense and straight shooter. It feels like he relates to the players well, but there's also this level, like certain standard that he
Yes.
puts on them. And he's one of those guys that if you do what he says, he'll rock with you tough. If you're not able to execute at the level of his expectations, you can end up in that doghouse. So it feels like there's very little like in between with him. But I think because he's like that, eventually there will be a sense of consistency with his team, especially once you kind of go above and beyond at the quarterback position.
Yeah, once he gets that answer at the quarterback position, I think you're right. He is a borderline OCD, certainly a perfectionist, believes his system to be the one that needs to be executed flawlessly first and foremost, and then athleticism could add onto the top of that. But I do think that there would be a certain element of perfection demanded of folks operating within that system. And I could see that being stressful, in particular, if you're at the quarterback position. All right, Chris Royal coming in with the super chat. Jimmy's a very solid quarterback, but to Eric's point, Jimmy is Dr. Jekyll sometimes, Mr. Hyde. You never know who you're going to get. Yes, I've said it on this program quite often. Consistently inconsistent is sort of Jimmy Garoppolo's staple, that you're going to get a considerable time of good play, and then you're going to get some of those games where the turnovers just seem to come in bunches. He seems to have more of a meltdown game as opposed to, one turnover spread out over a series of games. It seems that they come in bunches for sure. And that's,
I think you know exactly who Jimmy G is.
Yeah.
Like, we know exactly who he is. We know exactly what to expect, right? Like, when anything weird happens, I don't think anybody's surprised, as well as when he leads them on a drive down the field that results in a touchdown at the end of the game. I don't think anybody's surprised by that either. So
No.
I expect sometimes a ball to get away from him and picked off over the middle. We understand what his strengths and weaknesses are. And I know we'll dive more into the quarterbacks, but I don't even think it's a case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I think it's just Jimmy.
That's a great point. That is what makes him up, is that dichotomy. It is that imbalance of good and bad at the same time. It is remarkable, his ability to just shirk off those terrible throws, those interceptions, and then lead that final drive at the end of the game. He does have the memory of a goldfish, which is, I think, what infuriates people at times when you see him on the sideline smiling after an interception. I believe fans are reading too much into that because it's his ability to move past that interception that makes him capable of those touchdown drives at the end of a bad game, like the one that we had against the Titans.
Yeah.
All right, get it.
You need that to be able to move forward, right? I mean, I'd say it about a defensive back as well. It's not going to always go your way. When things don't go your way, you got to be able to overcome it. Now, obviously, I think for fans and probably for me as a coach too, I see my guy laughing on the sideline. I'd probably be pissed about it, but how do you respond? And that's probably the bigger takeaway more than anything else.
Yeah, I would think in the locker room, that's what they're concerned about. How do you respond? I mean, you can get caught on the sideline laughing about whatever. No one knows what was going through both of the players' heads at that time. We just read into what we see on the sideline. But I guess I get the frustration as well. All right, this is something that you hear considerably, and I think it's relevant as we have what is setting up to be most likely Trey Lance's second start for the 49ers. But people always talk about the game slowing down for rookies in the league, that players come in from college and it's just a different speed. You're taking the best of the best from the college game, putting them all on the field in the NFL. So it's basically an all-star game at all times. As someone who played in the league, can you describe what people really mean when they say that the game slows down for rookies at some point?
Yeah. Okay. So obviously my situation is different than a quarterback, but let's just
Right.
talk about it in terms of the cornerback position, right? And maybe we can kind of tie in Trey Lance to this as well. I come from a Division II school, and Lance FCS, and he was at the highest level of FCS. Like, they were great. He was in a powerhouse. I went to a Division II school. Things were a little more simplistic for us, right? We ran our basic coverages, and it was what it was. There wasn't too much nuance to what it was. Just go out there, execute cover 1, cover 2, cover 4, or cover 3, and boom, that's it. When I get to the NFL, because there's so much movement, there's so many flipping plays, you have the motions and all that. Every time somebody motions, more times than not, my responsibility as a cornerback changes. I wasn't used to that. I'm used to, well, okay, I got cover 3, and then I just do this. In the NFL, I get there and there's all these different checks. There's this, there's that, there's these different type of zones. You got different type of cover 3s. You have match, you got fire zones, you got sky. And each time, at the blink of an eye, when a change happens, I have to be able to diagnose that right now and know exactly what my responsibility is, depending on that coverage. And then it also can change depending on how many guys are to my side. So I can start off with 2 guys to my side, 1 guy motion away. Am I counting the back to my side? Is the back away, or is it to me? Is he inside the hashes? Is he inside the numbers? Where are these guys lined up? And it all changes your responsibility. So a lot, and that's the cornerback position. That's supposed to be one of the easier ones. I
Right,
thought I
which
would
is
learn,
like read and react. It's not the quarterback.
right, and I thought I would learn safety as well, because at 6'2", almost 200 pounds, it's like, oh, I could play safety too. No, I couldn't. The safety was the quarterback of the defense, and he was in charge of the strengths and the weak side, and rolling this way. Then okay, tight end here and away. Like, is he detached? Is he attached? All these different things that you have to know. So I'm like, okay, can't play safety. But cornerback, the most simplest one, where you feel like, okay, I'm just going to line up and play. No, it was much more difficult. So as a rookie coming in and trying to learn those things on the fly, I can't play as fast as I typically would, because I'm thinking, and at the snap of the ball, I'm thinking about, like, all right, I got, I'm lining up across from Braylon Edwards, and Braylon Edwards motions away. Now it's Clyde Gates. And then, okay, oh, is it 2 guys? Oh, the ball snap. And I have to be able to play, and you just don't play as fast as you typically would. Now, a transition that who it wasn't hard for was like my guy D. Milliner, right? D. Milliner, he was the 9th overall pick that year. And D. Milliner, the way that these things were, the way that they call plays at Alabama was similar to the Jets. Some of the verbiage a little different. So the transition for him was a little bit more, it was a little simpler for him, as opposed to me, who a lot of this was new to me. So
Yeah, it was more of a seamless
tie it into Trey
transition.
Lance, yeah, and kind of where some of his issues are and what he's struggling with, and then it might make a little bit more sense for some of the fans.
And so when you are on defense and you are thinking a little bit more than you should, right? I mean, that sounded incredibly complex to go from a situation where you basically know your assignment on each individual play and it's not going to change, to where you're on the field, the seconds of the play clock are counting down to the snap. And if anything changes, you need to think, rethink, reprocess, and then get yourself set up for the play with this new information that has shifted out. And you're still, I mean, on defense, you're still covering a limited portion of the field, a limited percentage of the play, as opposed to the quarterback, where when something changes, you are the entirety of the play, right? It operates through you. How big of a difference are just those milliseconds that occur that slow you down as you're processing it? How much advantage can a veteran take of a rookie who's in their head thinking?
Oh yeah, well the veterans, 2-3 steps ahead, so they know. I remember just being up and studying and studying and studying and studying my playbook and studying my playbook and trying to learn every different adjustment. I remember the receivers, and there's a big transition for receivers as well. My buddies walking around with note cards, and I mean nonstop. Like, okay, they're studying, then they flip it over, test themselves. Like, there's a lot that goes into it. The quarterback, same thing. You go from a playbook that's probably a little bit more simplistic, and I was there with Geno Smith, and I remember seeing how stressed Geno was throughout that time and training camp and preseason and all that, and what went into him trying to improve, and even now, like seeing him turn into a really good, a solid backup NFL quarterback. Like I think that's great, because I know how tough it is. The quarterback position, they have to learn a lot more, because one, you have to learn the playbook, right?
Right.
And it's just way more complicated than it is in college, period. Now, let's say you're somebody like Trey Lance, who's coming from the FCS. Shout out to North Dakota State, because they do put a lot on their quarterback in the sense of learning, like, just how to play quarterback. But what he's going up against is still simpler than it would be if he were going up against like Alabama every week. And even then, there's still a transition going to the NFL. So a lot of what he's used to, and I bet you can look at his college film, guys just line up and play their defense. So yeah, he can identify the strength side or the weakness and know how to flip plays and do those things, call plays and huddles. And those are things that he probably came in and knew how to do well. But now the looks and the how complicated the defenses are in the NFL, that's a big transition for a guy like Trey Lance, who has not seen that. So now you go from it being much more difficult, much more complicated. You have to learn this playbook from Kyle Shanahan, who everybody knows how difficult that can be, as well as start to understand what you're seeing from the defensive side of the ball. And all of that with the, moving and guys and the motion. Like in college, it's a lot easier to just be like, okay, they line up in cover 4, and I know where to go in cover 4. NFL, it might start off, it look like cover 4, then it can roll, it can look like 2, then it can be cover 3. I mean, and then there's match, and it's like, wow, what is this? And all that kind of delays your reaction as a quarterback and makes it more difficult.
And so Trey, in coming in from a school that has a more pro-ready style offense, benefited from that, benefited from being under center, if I understand you correctly. But because of the division that he was in, didn't play against the elite college defenses that are doing more complex schemes. And so even though he may have a greater understanding of the pro style offense, adjusting that at the line of scrimmage in real time is still going to be an issue for him coming into the NFL.
I would say, yeah, and I would say it's the post-snap reads that probably will get him the most. So he might understand, okay, I'm seeing this pre-snap, and then pre-snap, and I always tell people, you watch Trey Lance, when his pre-snap, what he's looking at pre-snap matches up with what he sees post-snap, it looks really good from Trey Lance. He plays on rhythm, he throws a good, accurate ball, he can throw with touch, it looks great. When the post-snap does not match up with what he sees pre-snap, that's when you see Trey Lance get in a lot of trouble. That's when you see him throw 1,000 miles an hour because he knows he's late. He's not playing with anticipation. He tends to be inaccurate because now his feet get off and everything like that. So a lot of his issues come from what I understand, a lot of his issues come from not truly knowing what he's seeing post-snap, and then everything else kind of goes haywire.
And if you're late in the NFL, that's trouble.
You can't be late, especially over the middle.
Certainly not over the middle. That is a bad spot with a lot of traffic. All right, for anyone that is joining the broadcast late, I just want to review that we have Croc here talking football with us. Eric Crocker, ex-NFL player. If you do not subscribe or follow, his information is down in the description of the video. as always, welcome you if you enjoy the content to like the content, help us get our message out to more people, and subscribe to both channels. He's on the podcast Locked On 49ers, and we are transitioning into what everybody wants to talk about. And I can't blame them. The faithful are all over the quarterbacks and the quarterback conversation. And Croc, I just want to get your official opinion. I'm sure folks that watch your channel already know this, but as of right now, in your opinion, if both could start, who should start for the 49ers at quarterback?
Oh, okay, so it's crazy. It's such a simple question, but it's so loaded at the same time.
Yes.
I would say in theory, all right, in theory, and kind of trying to think about what Kyle Shanahan is thinking as well.
Right.
Jimmy Garoppolo, and we hear this term thrown out there a lot, but Jimmy Garoppolo, in theory, gives you the best chance to win. And the reason for that is just because there's less unknown, right? We talked about
He's
Jimmy
a known
Garoppolo.
quantity.
We know what he is. We know his strengths, his weaknesses. We know that there might be a weird pass here and there, but we also know that his play can lead to wins. When it comes to Trey Lance, we know the immense talent. We know the ability is there. We know he can throw to all levels of the field. We know how high that ceiling is. We know he can, run, and he can do all these great things. But we don't know at what level will he right now, be able to execute. And I think because of that, Jimmy Garoppolo would be the starter. Now, that's not me saying that Trey Lance can't be better. If it were up to me, I would have eliminated that process by just not having Jimmy Garoppolo on the team and then living with the ups and downs of whatever you get from a rookie quarterback. But when you have Jimmy Garoppolo on there, it makes it a little more difficult to just be like, well, I'm just going to live with whatever happens with a rookie quarterback.
Right. I have said this multiple times myself, that the flaw in this strategy happened in the offseason when they decided to try and do both, when they attempted to keep Jimmy Garoppolo and win this year and invest everything they did in Trey Lance. And it sounds like you just echoed that sentiment in your belief as well. Do you think that now that we have this situation, and I agree with you in just wrapping that up, that with Jimmy, you know what you get in that, it's probably easier for Kyle Shanahan to scheme around that because it's a known quantity, because he knows exactly who Jimmy is, what Jimmy's strengths are. He can then create a game plan around him that's more consistent, excepting for the interceptions that are going to be made. Now that we're in this situation with a less than 100% Jimmy and a healthy Trey, do you believe that changes the decision going into this weekend's game?
Oh, 100%. You play Trey, and this is the perfect scenario for a Trey Lance, a guy who has kind of been sitting and marinating and learning and processing things, and probably knows a little bit better now kind of where to go with the ball. And, I talked about, processing post-snap and where to go with the ball and things like that. He should be more improved. Now, regardless of how much more improved he is, when the live bullets start flying, you're just going to see things that you're not prepared for. So I definitely expect to see some weird moments. I call it weird moments. I expect to see weird moments from Trey Lance where it looks less than ideal. But we also know that we've seen that with pretty much every rookie quarterback. Unfortunately for Trey Lance, he's in the midst of a playoff push, and his misses or his mistakes will be more magnified. So I think it's a tough situation for him. I look at it as trying to block that aspect of it out and just know I just want to see where he's at and what things he needs to improve on, just like I would any other rookie in their second start.
Do you think that it's a personality type as far as folks that would take the pressure of a must-win situation and use that as motivation versus, being overwhelmed by it? Does it take a certain type of individual to allow for the moment not to be too big for them?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a couple of things. One, experience, but two, it definitely, takes a certain level of confidence within yourself. And from everything that I've seen and what I hear, and just hearing how someone speaks, Trey Lance strikes me as someone that has a ton of confidence in himself. So
I agree with that.
He was a guy and this is not me just speaking in hindsight, when it was the offseason and the draft is rolling around, and it was maybe a couple of days before the draft, someone asked me, hey, what quarterback would you take? And I said, if I had to bet my life savings, which isn't like a crazy amount, but if I had to bet my life savings on any of these quarterbacks to be successful, any of them, it would be Trey Lance. Just because, and I got that tweet, it's still out there pre-draft. The reason why is because of the person that he is and everything that I'm hearing about him and listening and hearing how everyone talked about him. This isn't someone who I feel like the moment is ever going to be too big for. He's still going to have those learning curves, just like anyone else, right? But I believe because of who he is, and I've been in the locker room with these guys. I've been in the locker room with NFL players, and different players at every level. Not everybody cares enough to overcome their shortcomings. Not everybody is going to work hard enough, even if they have all this immense talent. Some of these guys aren't going to work hard enough to overcome some of their failures. And that's why sometimes you see a guy drafted in the top 10, but he doesn't pan out. When I look at Trey Lance and the stuff that he's made of, going back to when he was a middle school kid and how he would wake up his dad at 5 a.m. to go work out because he wanted to get better. Not everybody is like that. So with him, and everybody talks about like a Josh Allen and how much Josh Allen has gotten better. Trey Lance is made up of the same type of stuff.
I love it. And for anyone that's not familiar, there are some backstories out there on Trey Lance that do go into just what he's made of that Croc is talking about here. And in reading some of those, that was my takeaway as well, that his father, who, correct me if I'm wrong, if you know, but I believe was an ex-NFL player as well, made it to the league, and basically instilled in Trey this idea that I will help you out and show you the ropes and get you to where you need to go, but only if you're the one who's driven to do it. Only if you're the one who comes into my room and gets me up in the morning. If you wake me up, I will jump out of bed. I'll be ready to go. I will never falter there, but you have to come wake me up. And the story is, and maybe it's legend, but I like it. I like storylines. The story is that Trey never missed a morning. That regardless of the weather there, and I know it could be unpleasant in that neck of the woods, he came in, woke his dad up, and they went and worked out. To me, that leads to what Steve Young was talking about in his interview with Matt Mayoko. And I wanted to ask you if you agree with Steve's assertion that you can, in fact, learn on the bench. It may not be as good as if you get actual in-game experience, but you can, in fact, learn on the bench as long as you attack the preparation maniacally, and that Trey's background shows he's capable of that.
Right. Can you hear that?
A little bit, but it's not distracting.
Hold on one second.
We will be right back, ladies and gentlemen. Ooh, got to block a little something in the comments there. I love it when you get spam in the comments.
Yeah. Sorry about that. My dog was scratching at the back door trying to get in. That's what that noise was. And I thought he'd just go away.
Got you. No worries.
Definitely didn't. But yeah, as far as Trey Lance and the stuff that he's made up with, like, those are the things that have you encouraged by what he potentially can become. So, all the talent and everything, possessing all that ability, it means nothing if you're not going to go above and beyond with the work ethic. And from all reports and everything that everybody's saying, and it's not just like one person that maybe is close to him. It's literally every single person that's been around him, even Daniel Jeremiah. I always listen to the things that people say about him when they don't have to say it. So Daniel Jeremiah, he was on with Rich Eisen, and he just talked about how this was one of the most amazing kids he's ever been around, mature and wise beyond his years. And he said he's made up of this stuff that only few guys have. And when I heard that, I was like, I'm sold. Yeah,
because he's got no reason to push out a narrative in doing that. Do you think that for Lance, we talked about the game slowing down. Is that something you believe only happens with extended time on the field? Or does that happen if you are maniacally attacking your preparation while on the sideline? Can that occur? I mean, is it possible that when Trey steps on the field, that the game will have slowed down after that last start against Arizona?
Yeah, I think to a certain extent, but at the end of the day, you're only going to be as good as a lot of the in-game reps. Think about it like this: you have Nick Mullins, right? Nick Mullins had that maniacal, just
Yes,
like
he
he was a
did.
maniac about the details and staying after practice, doing all the walkthroughs, like walking through the whole thing, calling out plays. But at the end of the day, he was only so good. And even then, with live reps, he still threw interceptions. He still made mistakes, right? So yeah, you can prepare as well as you can, and I think that can help you win some games. But if you want to be consistent at the NFL level, you still have to have a certain amount of talent. But it definitely it can help. It can help for sure. It does
Yeah.
help.
For a guy like Trey, who all reports are that he spent considerable time in the offseason working on his mechanics. And I think that in my experience, when I was up in Seattle at that game and watching Trey warm up prior to the game, it seemed like he was still focused on those mechanics in just those simple four-man formations where he and Jimmy Garoppolo were warming up pre-game, that he was really focused on. After a throw that didn't go directly on target, he would snap the throwing motion several times in between throws just to get it to whatever he was focused on, that snap or a release at a certain point or a follow through, whatever it was he was working on. He clearly was practicing there. Will time away help him in that regard, that the more reps he's taking with whatever he's working on with his mechanics, the better?
Yeah, definitely. And, I think even more so than mechanics, it's just getting comfortable, right?
Yeah.
Look at, and I know I referenced Josh Allen, but about a week ago, I went back and I watched Josh Allen in his or not, I don't even know if it was his fourth start, but it was the fourth game of the season, his rookie year. And I just wanted to see, like, we knew he was athletic, but or talented and inaccurate, but what did it look like? And it was some of the worst quarterbacking I've ever seen. Like, it was terrible. I mean, it was even hard to find like a flash in that specific game. It was like week 4 against
Right.
the Green Bay Packers. If any of you guys want to go watch, just so you know, I'm not like BSing you. All right. And so
Yeah.
that may have been his fourth start, but it was terrible. Balls flying all over the place, just dropping back, throwing it, taking random sacks, getting thrown at the ground, thinking that he can just beat everything with talent. I mean, it was so bad. It was so bad. And that was his fourth start, right? But then obviously, like, you see him improve and we see what he is today. But you watch him throw now, his feet don't have to be perfect. The arm doesn't have to be nothing. I mean, he's just so comfortable though. Same thing with like Aaron Rodgers. Now I know I'm talking about some elite guys, but
Right.
Trey Lance has an elite skill set. Not saying he's elite as a quarterback, but he has an elite
Yeah.
skill set.
He has elite upside for sure.
Right. A lot of it has to do with how comfortable does he get with what he's seeing and trusting and understanding what type of throws he can and cannot make. We heard Fred Warner allude to that, right? The whole thing about practice and the scout team and running it and understanding what, like, practice the throws right now. Don't be tight and don't be worried about throwing the interception. Just see what throws you can make, what throws you can't. Give us a good look. And going through that in practice, I think that helps. And then also, the more you see it in the games, it helps. But it takes a lot of reps. And if you think about that just from that standpoint, and we talk about Josh Allen a lot, right? Because he overcome being extremely inaccurate. He was, 4 years in college. He threw a lot at the junior college level, threw for 3 years at, Missouri or Wyoming, threw a ton of passes, over the first few years of his NFL career to get to the point now where he's really comfortable with throwing to where the feet don't have to be perfect. Everything doesn't have to be perfect for him to make this amazing throw. Now, at some point, Trey Lance will maybe get there, but even to that extent, it's going to take time. That's not a 1 or 2 year process. That's a 3, 4, 5 year process to get comfortable to that extent. And I think that's the part that fans are probably going to have to be a little patient with, because just the amount of reps just aren't quite there yet.
No, and it's fair to wonder if Niner faithful have that patience based on the frustration they have experienced at the quarterback position and where that puts them as far as just being ready to pounce on any little mistake. I don't know if that's going to be limited to Jimmy Garoppolo and they will extend significant patience to Trey Lance. I would hope so, given his young age, again, given the upside and given where he's at right now, acknowledging that he may need considerable time at the quarterback position in order to grow into the passer that we hope he can become. What type of a game plan are you expecting to see on Sunday against the Texans? Are you looking for more of what we saw against Arizona, or a bit more similar to what Jimmy Garoppolo would be running?
I'd say you should see some resemblance of what Jimmy does, a little bit more of that as opposed to what we saw against Arizona. Just kind of going back and thinking about it and looking at how that whole thing played out, there actually were more under center snaps than what I actually remember when I watched it the second time. Not saying there was a ton of it, but there was more than what I initially remembered. I'd expect there to definitely be more than that, but I think Kyle was trying to simplify things for him. Again,
Right.
I think it's the post snap that Trey Lance was struggling with early on, right? Just not knowing what he's saying, and not even just post snap, really trying to understand what does Kyle want from me, trying to master his offense and understand all the moving pieces and intricacies of his offense, as well as what he's seeing from the defense. So I'm pretty sure his head was probably spinning a whole lot. So how do you simplify it for him? Just give him these easy reads, and things he's comfortable with. I'd assume that he's more comfortable with some of the things now. It won't be to the full extent. It won't be to the extent of what Jimmy Garoppolo is comfortable with, but it'll be something to where I feel like they could expand on what we saw the first time he was playing.
Yeah, and if I hear you correctly, that goes back to what you said about if both were 100% healthy, why you would understand Kyle Shanahan going with Jimmy Garoppolo is that his understanding of the offense is where you would expect it to be after 4 years, and that Trey coming in and learning it this year is still probably swimming a bit, treading water, as opposed to being confident in what he's seeing, so confident that at the line of scrimmage, being able to make those adjustments in real time and then adjust after the snap as well. Did you think that Arizona did a good job of confusing Lance in that game?
Well, you had a couple game workers, right? Chandler Jones, you have JJ Watt out there. They were blowing up some run stuff. I think some of the misdirection definitely helped spring off a couple runs, but that's tough. You got Buda Baker out there. He's an all-pro safety.
Yes,
There's a lot of talent on that side. So I think, some post-snap movement, things like that, just to get him to kind of like freeze up for a second. And then, he has to double clutch and, just those type of things to make a rookie kind of pause and think about what's going on. Those things definitely, I believe, happened a lot in the Arizona game and make it more difficult. But I wanted to say this about the offense. My guy, Greg Pinelli, I have him on Mondays. We QB Monday on my YouTube channel. He trains and works and actually has this guy working under him, Tyler Bray, who the 49ers just signed to the practice squad.
Right.
And Tyler Bray have played with Kansas City, with Andy Reid. He played with Nagy, with the Chicago Bears. And he talked about like this Kyle Shanahan offense is much more difficult than anything he's ever been around.
Wow.
He said it's crazy how much more difficult it is. So, I mean, if it's difficult for an 8-year pro who has been in these different offenses and he's seen different
he's learned a few.
Yeah, learned a couple. He Andy Reid and Nagy, those are offensive-minded guys. Then it's got to be really difficult on a rookie who had been a part of an NFL team for maybe 4 or 5 months.
Oof. Yeah, I can only imagine the level of complexity. And again, having someone who is focused on perfection is such an OCD type of perfectionist mentality. It takes a certain type. And I do think that Trey has that mental makeup, and long term, I believe will have that success. Do you think that, judging from what you said earlier, my assumption is that, once Jimmy is healthy, you view it as a legitimate conversation as to whom Kyle Shanahan will start at that point, probably leaning toward Jimmy Garoppolo. Is there anything you think Trey could do this weekend against Houston to really snatch hold of the QB1 job and never let it go? Or if Jimmy's healthy, will he start against LA in week 18?
Yeah, I think if Trey Lance Kyle Shanahan said it early on, right? Like, we'll know when we see it, right?
Right.
If you're watching the game and you're looking, and even though there might be some weird moments, right? Some missed throws or turnover here and there, but if you're watching Trey Lance, you, the fans, everyone, and you say he's ready, that if you get that sense, then he'll be starting from here on out. I don't think we'll see Jimmy Garoppolo again. Now, if you watch it and you'll be like, just not quite right for a team that has Super Bowl aspirations, then you'll see Jimmy back in. But I'd assume I think he's going to do well. I think he's going to definitely do well enough to be able to hold on to that spot, because I don't think Jimmy was playing above and beyond in the first place. It was just at a good enough level to potentially win games. If Trey Lance can show you that, now I think he'll be the guy from here on out, and you'll live with that.
Man, I'm excited to see that for sure. And I think fans are as well. Chris Royal coming in. Jimmy has the polish, but man, Trey's athleticism and the lack of tape on him will put some massive stress on the defenses he faces. This is the storybook ending that, I and other 49er faithful want, is that Trey comes in, the time on the bench has allowed him to mature to a point, and the game is slowed down, and he comes in and the athleticism continues to jump off of the tape. He wins out the rest of the year and propels us deep into the playoffs. Teams don't have tape on him, right? This is the storyline that I can get behind as a miracle finish for the 49ers to this year. But I'm probably being a bit overly optimistic, and I will be patient. I'm not going to put the pressure on the kid if he doesn't deliver to that extent, because that is a big ask. Of no rookie has ever come in and won the Super Bowl. So it would be a big ask for somebody to come in with 2 games left and win must-win games and take us into the playoffs. But hey, I can dream, right?
Right. For me, it's just, does he look like he's the guy moving forward, right? Like that's all I want to see. Like, does he show you the stuff, whatever you thought of him when the 49ers were drafting him, right? And you're like, big arm, strong, athletic, smart. If he shows you flashes of those things, like, that's really all I'm looking for. Obviously, Houston, you got to win. But aside from that, it's just, does he show me the stuff so that throughout the offseason, I'm just confident that, hey, we got our guy. Now let's just continue to build on it and him get more and more comfortable.
Right. So that no matter how this season plays out, right, the dream being that we propel ourselves deep into the playoffs, but really the floor that you want to get is comfort, knowing you did the right thing and can build off of that going into 2022, that you have something that propels you forward, knowing that you made the right decision there. BMF Ranger coming in. Thank you, Mr. Schuh. You are the most optimistic YouTuber. Mr. Crocker, I enjoy your NFL insights. Thank you both very much. Thank you very much, BMF Ranger. Appreciate you coming in and joining the program. HR, I have the feeling the league is about to realize that Trey is a freak mind-body athlete in a league of great athletes. He's going to elevate this offense. That's the dream for me, is that he can come in and show Kyle Shanahan what I believe he's looking to see, which is that he can operate the system from within the pocket, but then has the plus of his legs in ability to extend plays, and the plus of his arm in the ability to just make the throws that Jimmy cannot or does not consistently hit. That would be my dream. All right, well, I couldn't have you on, Croc, without getting into a little bit of talking cornerbacks, because, that is your wheelhouse. I know 49er faithful are all about the quarterbacks, but there are some important questions to be settled at the thinnest position group, you might argue, within the 49ers. What's your overall impression of the development of Ambry Thomas so far, Croc?
When I watch him, my biggest takeaway is that, one, he has the athletic ability. So first and foremost, like that's one of the first things. Like, just, does he have the movement skills that I covet? Does he have like the long speed? Does he have the ability to run with guys vertically? Once I see he has that, right, and we've seen the plays where it's like, man, he's in great position, just make a play on the ball. It's really that simple. Like, he does the hard part. The hard part is being able to stick with NFL receivers. The hard part is being able to run with these guys vertically. He shows he can do that. Now he has to flip that switch in his head to where when the ball is in the air, it's mine.
Right.
It's like he has to have that mindset of, like, man, like, how dare you throw the ball at me? I played, obviously, most of my success came in the Arena Football League. There was a season I had 11 interceptions. And I was one of the best corners in the league that year.
Hell yeah.
And it really was as simple as, when you throw the ball at me and that ball is in the air, it's mine. and he has to take on that mindset of just taking the ball away. So we saw it. We've seen it a few times against Atlanta, a couple times. Russell Gage in the end zone. Dude, you're in perfect position. That ball has to be yours. There should have been interception on the sideline with Kyle Pitts. That ball has to be yours. So once that part clicks in and that mindset takes over, I think you're talking about somebody with high upside.
That makes sense. I mean, that first box of being able to run with NFL wide receivers, if you can't check that box, it doesn't matter what your ball skills are, right? I mean, if you're not in close proximity to the ball itself, to the receiver, you are going to get toasted. But that shift of mindset does seem to be one that he still needs to make. I mean, he was close on that interception, but then the receiver just took it away from him. That seemed to be that sort of snatch the ball mindset that you're talking about for the receiver. We just need that to develop within Ambry Thomas. But only a couple games in, seems to be showing the promise that you would like to see. Once Emmanuel Moseley returns, do you think there's any chance that it's E-Man and Thomas, or do you think that they'll stick with the veteran in Josh Norman?
I think we talked about what could Trey Lance do to finish out the year and hold off, Jimmy Garoppolo. I think it's the same for Ambry Thomas. Just continue to get better. And if Ambry Thomas in these next couple games show you the ability to start, making some of those plays, even if it's just a pass breakup, which he did against Tennessee. He had a couple of pass breakups and he also gave up the catch on the free play. But continue to kind of have those pass breakups and make those plays. I think from if he can keep doing that, you should play him over a Josh Norman. And because Josh Norman is definitely limited with athleticism, he has to play everything so soft because he struggles to run with guys vertically. It kind of makes it difficult for him to guard certain things. I would start to lean a little bit more towards Ambry Thomas and Emmanuel Moseley from that standpoint. But you gotta show me, gotta continue to get better. And I think Ambry Thomas so far has been doing that so far.
Yeah, I would agree that he seems to have the greater upside between the two, and there are significant limitations that seem so obvious in Josh Norman that he does need to attempt to keep everything in front of him, and that just allows pretty consistent completions against him. And the rookie did have a good game against Tennessee, save for that one very visual play that everyone saw on 3rd and 23, unfortunately.
Very visual offensive pass interference, man. Shoot.
Yeah, right. He got tossed on that one. And maybe it's a pass that doesn't even get thrown if we aren't offsides, if it isn't a free play and Tannehill doesn't just chuck it up as a 50-50 ball.
Do you remember what happened that play and what the time was?
What the time was left? I mean, I remember Arden Key jumping off sides, but.
So these dudes, man, I looked to my uncle. I said they're not snapping the ball. The time was running down. There was about a 3-second difference between the play clock and the game clock as the time was running out in the quarter. So all they were trying to do is see, hey, can we get them to jump? If not, we're not even going to run a play. And it was clear as day. They were just going to let it go into the fourth quarter and probably just run a screen or draw.
Right.
But they got Nick Bosa to get anxious the first time. He jumped, but he got back. And then they did a hard count again, and then Arden Key jumped, and it's like, all right, now we got a free play on a play where I don't think they had any intentions on snapping the ball.
Brutal. Absolutely brutal. I mean, 3rd and 23, the D-line was thinking pad the stats, get an additional sack, get them off the field in that regard. But you would think that against max protect that they were throwing all night against our defense, it would have just been a traditional rush would have been enough, not needing to get off like that.
In situations like that, I don't even think that they would have really tried to throw the ball down the field. I think it would have been a screener draw.
Check it underneath.
I mean, there's no teams don't have a play for 3rd and 23.
Right.
So unless you just give them the opportunity to just chuck it upfield, which most teams won't in situations like that, like it's screen or draw. So even with the D, that's why I was wondering, why is the D-line so anxious anyways? Because they're not doing anything to really throw the ball down the field. So that there was a lot of confusion for me just understanding how offenses tend to think in those type of situations.
All right, one more secondary question before we do a quick game prediction of how you think this one's going to turn out on Sunday. We'll get to that in just one second. But one of the things that the Texans have been able to do so far this year is generate turnovers. They've been 3-3 over their last 6, and against the Chargers, who are a playoff caliber team, they basically won that one with 17 points off of 3 turnovers, one for a pick 6. The 49ers have been pretty incapable of consistently generating turnovers themselves, and with a very talented veteran safety duo, that's somewhat surprising to me. Do you have any opinions on things that Jaquiski Tartt and Jimmy Ward might be able to do to put themselves in a better position to force turnovers, or is it a very schematic reason?
Oh, I think right now, to try to protect the guys on the outside, they've went to more too high. I think when you look at it from a too high perspective, it's definitely harder to make plays on it if you're the safety, just because you're kind of out there really just kind of helping as opposed to reacting and jumping routes. So unless they can kind of disguise some too high and roll to some single high, it's going to be hard for them to make a play. And it's hard for me to envision them really doing that, especially with the speed that the Texans have on the outside. Texans, for everything that they are, which isn't like this great team, they definitely have some good vertically pushing weapons with Brandon Cooks, with Chris Conley, with Philip Dorsett, who caught a ball down the field as well, and Davis Mills, who isn't afraid to give those guys opportunities down the field. So I would expect to see a little bit more too high, and again, it'd be a little more difficult for guys to get interceptions unless the quarterback just forces it downfield into double coverage.
That makes a ton of sense, that they will have more cleanup duty, staying back there, staying safe to protect the outside. All right, before we transition to the last topic, a couple of super chats in here. Again, just a reminder, if you joined the program late, we are talking with Eric Crocker, ex-NFL cornerback. You can follow him on Twitter, subscribe on YouTube, listen to his podcast. All that information is down below in the description of the video. If you like the content, please do like the video and subscribe here as well. Cassidy coming in. Hey, Eric, what do you think Trey Lance needs to work on? I'd say his footwork. If you had one thing that you had to put out there, Croc, what would you say?
Reps.
Reps.
I think just reps, because with the reps, the footwork and everything will kind of clean up itself. Now, obviously, if you just watch him and the live bullets are flying and you're saying, oh, he gets a little off here, or, oh, look how he bouncing up and down there. A lot of times it's because he's a little bit unsure of what he's seeing. I challenge people. Matter of fact, on YouTube, there's this video out there, and it's like Trey Lance's quote unquote highlights from preseason. Watch Trey Lance's highlights and just look at what it looks like when he's in rhythm. And you don't see an issue with the feet. You don't see an issue with not being able to throw with touch and those type of things. When when everything is right with him, it looks good. The feet and stuff look good. When he's not sure what he's seeing and he's not comfortable with something, that's when the feet are off. That's when he's throwing too hard. So I think the most important thing for him is continuing to get those reps to where things aren't such a surprise when he sees it. I think from there, you'll start to see things kind of clean itself up in a sense. Obviously, you can always continue to rep those things and get better at it. But I think just the reps in general will start to clean up some of the footwork and the accuracy and some of those issues.
That makes a ton of sense. Now, here's a clarifying question on that comes in from Brian. Is there going to be a difference between the reps he gets in the regular season and the reps he gets in the playoffs? So Brian asks, do you think seeing the speed of playoff football will help Trey next year?
I never played in a NFL playoff game. From everything that I understand, it's faster than regular season. So yeah, I think more than anything this year is just, especially you get to play in the playoff game, like just the experience of all that and seeing it. And I know everybody's going to want like the great results, and I get it. As a 49er fan, I do too. But as a former player myself and understanding what kind of goes into everything, to me, I'm more like valuing just the overall experience that Trey Lance is going to be able to get, whether it's regular season or playoffs. Just seeing that and feeling that and feeling that environment and playing on the road, playoff game, how crazy the crowd is going, how much turned up the players are, the chippiness of it. I think that he'll benefit from that more than anything else.
It's wild to think that the game can possibly get any more intense than it already is, with players on the field attempting to, basically murder one another on every play and then ratcheting it up for the playoffs as well. Just that much more adrenaline flowing in. All right. Thank you so much for your time today, Croc. Really appreciate it. As we wrap up in this one, again, go subscribe to Eric Crocker on his YouTube channel. Sign up for his podcast, Locked On 49ers, where he's the co-host wherever you get your podcast. I know it's on my list on the Apple Tunes where I'm out on my walk and I'm listening to you and Brian Peacock, and I appreciate it. Good content. Good content. Let's talk about the game itself. How do you see this breaking out high level? How do you think the 49ers approach it? And if you're comfortable, what do you think the final score is going to be in this one?
Yeah, it's something that you definitely want to lean on, the run game and control the game from that standpoint. I think the defense has been good all year. They've given up a play here and there, but for the most part, they've limited scores, and they definitely make it tougher on opposing teams. I think they'll make life tough on Davis Mills as well. So when I look at the 49ers in this game, I'm taking them. If I had to put a score out there, I'd say like 27-13. I feel comfortable saying that, even with Trey Lance at quarterback. Numbers for Trey Lance, we'll say like a, 17-25 for, 210 passing yards and another 60 rushing yards, two combined touchdowns. I think something like that. I think we'll see something like that for Trey Lance.
I would love to see it. I mean, I think that the 49ers should lean on their run game in this one. It sets up against a team that's second worst in the league in yards allowed rushing, 4.7 yards per carry that Texans defense is allowing. The 49ers are getting healthy at the position. Deebo Samuel, Trey Lance, you can get creative with this one. I don't want to see more than a handful of designed runs for Trey, but I think you do want to put that in there because that's within his skill set. That's going to allow him to get comfortable. And if the 49ers are able to get rolling like that, then we know how that usually turns out. They usually play complementary football on defense. They get after the quarterback. And if they're able to disrupt Davis Mills, it could be a long day. I have it breaking out pretty similarly at 34-16. I made that prediction earlier in the week, and I'm sticking with it. I think it will be a hell of a game on Sunday. BMF Ranger coming in saying he's matching any super chats from anyone coming in, so I appreciate that coming in here. Chris, 27-10 with the prediction. Niners, baby. Bang, bang, Niner gang. And BMF, a man of his word, matching that as well. Awesome. Eric, thank you so much for coming in and talking Niners football with me on New Year's Day. Man, it was an absolute pleasure having you on here, sir.
Oh, man, thanks for having me on, man. It was fun talking, man. Got to do it again.
Yes, most definitely. We will have you back again. If you like the show, please do hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't. And go subscribe to Croc as well. The information is down in the description. I will be back for a pregame show tomorrow, starting an hour before kickoff, and I'll be joined by Silverado Kev. Until then, again, Croc, thanks so much for being on. Niner faithful, cheers to you.